Hi, Emil.
Hello, Peter. How are you?
I'm doing very well, and you?
I am preparing for tour, and I'm pretty stressed out about it.
Yeah, no, I always think the week before a tour starts is the most stressful time any musician has to deal with. But you have a lot of books to dip into behind you.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm a huge fan of your work and of this record, and so it would be great to hear a little bit more about you for people who don't know much about you. And I always like to start by asking someone if you are willing to describe your mother and father.
My my father, he her mother his mother was 40 years old when they got him. So he was like it's it's like maybe it wasn't even supposed to happen from a statistical point of view.
Right.
And so he is an only child. He grew up as a farmer's son.
Hmm. My dad was a farmer as well as engineer.
Yeah. And he's a music lover. He's not an artist. Like he's not artistic. He's a farmer.
Right.
in that sense. He's been working as a social worker his whole life, and
Great.
my mother came from another small place from Sweden. Um,
In the countryside?
in the countryside, yeah. It's like they they were born in the 40s, and back then people were still coming from small places.
Sure.
It's like this whole urban movement. It's starting to become a thing of the past that people actually live lives outside of the cities.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Um,
And so, what do you remember of growing up? Do you grew up in the country, or had they moved to the city?
no, it's we. I grew up in Jönköping. It's like the 10th biggest city of all small cities in Sweden.
Right.
uh, just doing pretty much exactly what I am doing these days. I was doing as early as I can remember.
Right. So you knew you wanted to be a musician from the word go.
Yeah, I wanted to be. It was like from when I reached some sort of conscious age, I knew you cannot work as an artist, a musician. It's just not possible. So for quite a long time, I knew that I have to have a second plan because my
Right.
first plan is not possible.
Sure.
Everyone knows you can't do this thing
Sure.
that we're doing.
Sure.
So, and I didn't know what that would be. So I felt, I kind of developed a feeling of everything else being a threat to music and to creating
Right.
art. And but it's so interesting when I now see like perfect straight lines from I'm 38 now, and from when I was 5, I do exactly the same things.
Yeah.
I like I recently rediscovered grid sequencers, and when I was 6, I wanted to have those, and
Yeah.
I was thinking in those terms of how to make music, and I had this alarm watch, like the wake up clock that had this ticky 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 tick,
Great.
that kind of sound, and I
Yeah.
remembered feeling very strongly that this is the way, this is the music I want to do. This is what I want to create in music. And then it hit me like 3 years ago. This is the first time I actually have this little machine that can do that same thing I was dreaming of doing. So I I think I in a I think it's interesting how technology forms the age of technology, how that forms how you create art.
Yeah, I think it's like little kids playing with new toys.
Yeah.
And I know Robert Fripp said something that the only interesting times are when you know absolutely nothing and when you know absolutely everything. And all the stuff in the middle is not so interesting. But when you're playing and you know nothing, you make discoveries that can lead you places that you wouldn't have gone otherwise. No, I'm definitely like that.
Yeah.
So what were the bits of technology that, besides this one, that liberated you or took you exploring?
I mean, for me it was because right up till pretty much now I've been interested in some sort of collage music.
Yeah.
And so when the Swedish government did a push in the late 90s that people should have PCs in their homes.
Great.
So they had like tax deductions. So we got a PC home. And then in the next wave, I got a computer on my own. And the same week I got it, I started making music. And I'm really curious what would have happened if I had that technology 10 years earlier, 15 years earlier.
Yeah.
But I also slowly, and I'm not saying this too proudly, but I'm a little bit learning that it doesn't really matter what road you take because you're going to end up in a good place anyway. And if you start late, you got a lot of built up things you got to take care of. And I'm really formed by the technology and the age that I...
When you mention age too, I saw you said something about simplicity, and I know for me, as a younger person, you want to throw a lot of stuff on everything, and then you try and strip it back. And as an older man now, I am drawn. Well, I still love cluttering stuff up, but I'm instinctively more drawn to simplifying things, which I think you were saying you're noticing in your own work now.
Yeah, it's the first time that I have this strong, playful feeling of how to simplify things.
Yeah.
The album that you and I have released, it's not an example of that.
No, but yeah.
But I'm proud of it, but I am really excited about the plans, the ideas of music, because I want to record, and I want it to be super simple. And then maybe in the end, who knows? But it's the first time I have this inner urge to do it simple, and it's not that I know that it would be a good idea or that it would be available to people, but actually just as an artistic explosion or something of an urge to try to make things simple.
Yeah. So how's that going to manifest itself in Is it an arrangement? Just the number of people?
Yeah, definitely the number of people. I mean the work name for the next album on paper is like piano.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I think the recipe for it is me playing something, singing, and then now I'm playing a lot with Klaus Henrik, my friend, and we're gonna rehearse today, and I think he's gonna play something, and then we're not gonna do overdubs, and I'm not gonna double my voice. So if there is a vocal second part, then he sings it, and
right.
So I'm curious how what's gonna happen, because when you lower like the ceiling, you're gonna magnify what's under it.
No, I think that it's really true. When I get lost sometimes, I make rules that restrict things. So we did a thing once with drummers where they couldn't use any cymbals, and it meant that they had to think in other ways, and opened doors. So I think that's very wise, just to restrict things sometimes.
My piano teacher in college, he was a really fascinating person because I wanted to do this thing I'm doing now, but I was studying to be a jazz pianist, and well, I didn't do my homework basically, but I still picked up some really interesting things. He always nagged me about playing in like the white keys, so instead I only play in D flat,
Right.
G flat, and A flat now.
Right.
Just because and he had a lot of interesting ideas of like how do you make a piano note long in time, and the only way you can do it is play it soft, because then you lose the attack and then you have a long note. And that's so interesting because everyone knows you can't affect the length of a note like once it's pressed down, but if you play it soft you will get a longer decay of the note.
Right.
And those kind of things are really interesting. And yeah,
So is piano what you return to?
it's what I'm right now. I'm drawn to key instruments. Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Pianos. I mean, I'm crazy about what I'm doing, which also makes me somewhat crazy sometimes. And I realized I needed electric grand, the ones you have played a lot. And so I found one, and I realized I really need this tool. I got to find a second one.
Right.
So I can tour with it. And then when I got this, I was really lucky. I got them cheap. I looked around for them. And then when I got the second one, I felt like I really need this one to stand here. I need another one to tour with.
Right.
So right now I got 3 of this electric grands.
Great.
And I have these plans for them that are super clear. I know exactly what I'm going to do, but I'm not really able to do it now because I actually will need a person.
Right.
Because otherwise I wouldn't be able to even put on clothes, because I would put this piano together and tune it. So it's a little bit planning for future. Like I somewhat need things to grow a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is another topic it would be interesting to talk to you about, like the size of your possibilities and how you deal with that, because every scale is a good scale to make music.
Yeah.
And I suppose you have, this is just me guessing, I suppose you have felt a situation where you have had 50 people helping you, but still something felt wrong. I just assume.
Oh, yeah. No.
And then it feels like, well, shouldn't things be right now? and the same thing can happen when you're carrying stuff up a pub staircase. And it was a friend of mine who said that I love carrying bags. This is what we're going to do our whole life. I mean, you can't expect things to change. We have to enjoy this the way it is now.
Yeah.
And I've really used that thought a lot, that you have to be able to, in every situation, make sure this is exactly what I want to do.
Yeah.
And then you get annoyed, of course.
And so with this present tour, how many people are you on stage?
It's still a fairly small situation. We're a few friends are joining us on the tour, and I'm bringing my oldest neighbor as a creative collaborator. We're really,
Yeah.
to put it positively, a tight crew.
Great.
But it's gonna be fun. It's an adventure.
So how many players?
It's me and Klaus Hendrik on stage, and we're doing all these things. We're still in the early phase of making it complicated.
Yeah.
But there is a time, hopefully soon, where things are gonna simplify and we're gonna be able to take things out instead of it.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting and strange phase of music, and I'm just really trying to enjoy it and make sure I'm as prepared as possible.
Yeah. And when you're writing, how do you normally start? Do you have a system, or is it just whenever an idea grabs you? Do you ever sort of go to work rather than
No,
here's an idea?
it's interesting because I I've had lack of good infrastructure in my job. It's like I've been moving around to my parents' house and to different houses working and setting up things. So because of that, for quite a while I haven't been able to try if I could have like routine and go to the work Nick Cave style. Uh, but I think I'm just really slow and thorough, I think. I used to think I was a fast person, but it takes time. I write 2 good songs a year, maybe 3, hopefully, or more. I don't know. I've been writing a lot now since this album was like put in the box, so it's interesting. And so I guess I've been in a collecting phase also.
And do you still like the idea of an album? You know, because a lot of younger musicians now just put out tracks as they come, and on vinyl, and the album is sort of dead for them. Is it still something that means something to you?
I still... I mean, how do you feel about, would you like to release tracks immediately, or do you want to collect it? Sorry for not answering your question.
No, sure. Well, I think for me it's both. Most creative people I know, when you finish something and you think it's brilliant, you want the whole world to hear immediately.
Yes.
And then the next day you listen back and you think it's all shit and you want nobody to hear. You know, so I don't. It can go like that. So I think there's an attraction sometimes. You know, I've done things faster and enjoyed that. And sometimes we used to do collaborative weeks at the studio with musicians from all over the place, and that was a lot of fun. And we had to get stuff done fast. And I've been working with a couple of other people, so I can enjoy both. But left to my own devices, you know, I like to chip away slowly. I remember I visited the painter Howard Hodgkin, and he had a studio, which I think was an old garage, but all his paintings were covered with white sheets, because his thing is color, you know, like sound might be for us. And so in the room, everything was white. And then when he was working on one painting, which may have been 15 years old, but, you know, he'd open it up for the day, and then the colors, it would have the space to speak. And I thought that was quite interesting, trying to work out what the sound equivalent would be. I mean, I think I don't do that. It's more of a mess. But do you have a structure in the way you organize things? I mean, Dickie, my engineer, does a lot of the organizing for me. But do you tend to do that yourself?
You mean like organizing it from a librarian's perspective or arranger's perspective?
I was thinking more librarians from the point of view, this is what we're going to work on, and, you know, say there's 100 ideas, but these are the ones we need to focus on. I mean, I think I'm too careful with all data and all recordings, and I realized that I need to be sloppier about, I mean, I'm sloppy about a lot of things, but maybe I need to be sloppy about the key things. Yeah, right.
So I should probably not do as much backups over projects. I should re-record them, and I should like let things be the way they are. And I guess that's what's happening. Like in the end, you realize you're not your own editor anyways. You don't know what's gonna be, what people are gonna love much later.
No.
But what's your longings for? Do you long for making music now? What is your vision right now? Like physically of what do you want to do? Is it a shape of what you're thinking about?
Well, I too been thinking about a piano record, but there's a lot of ideas, and I just want to keep exploring them. But it's I've had some time off. We had family health issues, and so I was a carer for a while. But now I'm getting back into music, and things seem to be going well. So I'm really enjoying it. I know I'll keep writing and playing piano and just working on ideas, regardless of whether there's a job or money attached. That I will do. I never pine for a stage. I always pine for a piano if I'm away on holiday. Sometimes, the only thing is you get rewarded by finishing, having to do a lot of promotion, which, like most musicians, I don't enjoy very much. And you have to do things like this when you should be getting your tour sorted out. But that's part of the job. You join the army.
I think what's so interesting about the piano is that it's a dead instrument in many ways, like we talked about earlier. You can just press the key, or you don't press it, and you choose when you press it and how hard. But it doesn't. I've even heard people that they've done measurements on, is it true that a certain player has a certain sound, but they've tried with different ways of pressing it and it sounds just the same. Then in the end, it's different worlds, of course, because it's in the timing. And I guess that's what's nice about piano, that in a way it is scored music, because you play what you got. And I think it's interesting.
Yeah, and you were talking also about, was it Stravinsky that wrote stuff that couldn't be played? With more fingers than we possess. So, sometimes exploring the rules and the limitations and then breaking them is maybe a good idea. And it might be nice just to work with two fingers or something. Sometimes.
Exactly.
But
what is? Do you? If someone asks you to play a certain room, do you, or record, but I'm especially asking, like, with an audience and a room, do you play the room, or do you try to make the room
come to you,
follow you?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I think a performer's job is seduction. You need to bring people to you rather than push yourself out on them. And so from many years ago, we'd often start very quiet and then work our way up to the loud stuff. I've tried many different ways, but I think it's more, you feel more engaged if you can feel people responding, that's the microphone, responding emotionally. But, one of the things that I love, about your music is there's something for the emotion, but there's also a lot for the head, in the harmony, the arrangements, in the lyrics. And, when you listen to music, is that what you look for?
That's a really interesting theme, because first of all, I would be interesting to hear if you feel the same about it. I listen only to jazz and classical music most of the time. Then there's a lot of music that goes into that music, and I feel at home with it. But I'm really interested in this fact that music can be too emotional.
Yeah.
And that it's not fair to the listener, because it is my job to make emotional or too emotional music, but it's also cheating in a way, like playing the angelic strings. So right now I'm curious about, or I'm trying to keep it in my head, to how can I make this less emotional and still keep the information.
Yeah, well, I tend to listen to whatever my 9-year-old son is playing in the car.
Yeah,
Because that keeps him very happy on the way
Well,
to and
that's-
back from school. And then it's, when I'm not making music, it's for films or current affairs. Those are the things that I tend to go for.
Yeah. But how do you feel about that, to not make music itself seductive, but actually try to be true about it in a way, and not even putting yourself as a seductor?
Yeah. Well, I remember reading, I can't remember whose quote it was, that someone who writes truthfully of themselves in their time writes for all people of all times. So that always seems to be a goal, and say in lyrics, you look at someone like Leonard Cohen, who's just, so many levels ahead in lots of ways, and just the intelligence of which he constructs beautiful emotional or spiritual, sexual images. And so I think, I have people like that I would aspire to and try and feed off. But I think, when bits of yourself are coming out, and often they don't, but when it does, I think you're right. It's not then. There's no trickery then. It's something genuine that you're feeling, and on a good day, the audience will be feeling it too.
Yeah, and it's also, someone said something about when there is a concert, they are your best friend, but afterwards, and not in a negative way, maybe they don't want to be your friend afterwards because they were in the moment, and you did not a job, but you created what universe or you created what was supposed to be done there, and you did it in a good way.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about, because it's a strange situation to be in the center of a room and seduce everyone. And I'm curious about if there's a healthy way of how to do that and still not consume yourself or anyone else. And I by that I think that if you take out the magic of it, I don't know. It's interesting because I'm also trying, how can I influence people the most as I can? So it's a double.
Yeah.
It's a double thing.
There is a question mark of, is there a predator? Is the audience hungry, like energy vampire? Is the artist Dracula, sucking the blood of the audience?
Yeah.
And is that a part of nature? So maybe you can fight it, and yet, I think often people that end up performing in any way have some need of attention. Most of us, I think, find in life solutions to problems. And so there is that side of it. But sometimes that some people are so needy that you, as an audience, want to resist. You don't want to give them what they need because it's being pulled out of you. And other times, it seems a balanced, healthy thing. So I think sometimes the life reflects what's going on internally.
Yeah.
That for instance, when I feel good about things, a lot of positive coincidences seem to happen. When I'm in a bad place, they don't.
Yeah, that expression, be careful what you wish for, is very powerful.
Yeah.
And it seems to be working that way, even if you have a totally materialistic way of seeing things. It's it's too powerful to not be true. It seems like.
Yeah. No, I remember someone went to Tibet and into a monastery there, and there was a book on the shelf which was by a man called Napoleon Hill, called Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
And it was, but this idea of wishing and visualization is a powerful one, I think. And, you sort of step into other people's dreams like you would step into their clothes. But you do so at your own risk.
So I'm sometimes I'm curious when it comes to becoming better, because I know I really have to improve in my professional or in my whole life, and sometimes I ask people what do they say behind their back in a positive way, but they don't tell me.
Yeah.
And I think that question can sometimes be quite interesting. And because all the time I think they say, Emil, he shouldn't do things so complicated. He should try to make things simpler. Yeah. Which is an interesting idea. But to phrase another question that's really obvious, but what do you think I should be doing now? Like, how should I improve this thing I'm doing?
I don't know. That's a difficult question. I think being more of yourself, whatever that is, seems to be part of what we should be trying to do. And I think it's also liberating. I don't believe in this barrier between artists and non-artists. This is a fantasy of talent. To me, everything is just a language. Yeah. If you dropped anyone in any country, after a year, they would speak that language. If you dropped them in a country where people communicated through sound, music, or another country through paint, they would pick up the language. Some will have more to express. So to me, there's no barrier with talent. It's about content, how you use that language, and what are you trying to say, or do you have something you really need to share? And I don't know. And then the other part is just the work a day, like we were talking about, 9-to-5 job. When I worked on this soundtrack for Last Temptation, we worked in the Brill building in New York because Scorsese was editing there. And that was where all these great songwriters used to turn up every day, 9 to 5, in the way you described it, I think, for Nick Cave. But they'd still come up with great stuff. But somehow it was demystified, and yet, sometimes music is a spiritual thing that has always been part of spiritual traditions all around the world, and yet it's also this commercial thing that helps sell baked beans, and we're left somewhere in between those two worlds.
Yeah. What is your... Do you have anything right now that, like, it doesn't have to be musically, but in life, but what are your, big urges right now, but could also be, music-wise, what do you have to do, now?
What do I have to do? Well...
what do you have to do?
Right. I think because we've had some health challenges, family, I'm sure at the point when you die, you're not thinking, oh, did I get that mix right on that third track? All you care about is the people you love. So that is a way, that's been good to have that focus in my life. And then do right by those you love. And then I think there are some things outside of music that, because of this connection with the medical world, I think there's a ton of stuff that could be done to improve that. So that's one of the passions I have at the moment, and technology. My dad was electrical engineer, inventor, so I love, the possibilities of technology for liberating people anyway. So I think for me, these are, with music, equal passions.
Yeah.
And,
It's
and for
interesting.
you?
Oh.
No, I was just going to say, what is it for you? What is it you have to do?
Well, I think that question for the first time doesn't really have an answer, because up until now it was stay floating and make sure you reach the shore.
Right.
And right now I'm not out in the open sea anymore.
Right. No, you sent a lovely letter where you said you felt your feet had touched the ground
Yeah.
in the water.
Yeah.
In the water, and that was I thought a very powerful image.
Yeah, so I think like when you have been out at sea and suddenly you reach the shore, you don't really have a plan.
Yeah.
Except I'm hungry.
Yeah.
You know, and I might need to sleep a little bit. So maybe I in all different, maybe I just need to sleep a lot in a bigger sense, rest. But I think the whole existential thing is a big struggle, and I don't have a family on my own, and I'm thinking a lot about if it's possible to live, if I wouldn't have a family on my own, if that would be a defendable life, or if
Yeah.
if it's laughing universe in its face, like if it's a really
That's
difficult question.
that's on your head, on your
Yeah.
mind. Yeah. And well, I just love being a dad, so that's been a huge thing for me. And but I think it's fine also not to choose that route. I mean, one of the good things, I think I can be selfish at times, and when you're a parent, it's like the new model is there. You're obsolete, and there's something more important than you. And that I think is good for all of us.
Yeah.
So
I think
that I would recommend.
Yeah. I'll take that with me. I think it's the fact that when there's a generation coming after you, it actually means, from a genetical point of view, that you're invincible. You live on forever, which you in fact do. And I think a lot of people that don't worry about these questions would worry if they didn't
Yeah.
form these generations, because then there is, I think it's a way of coping with our own death, the fact that we actually keeps on living through others. I heard pretty recently that you're pretty deep into thinking about astronomy and space. And
Well, no, I'm playing around with one song idea at the moment, but I have a casual interest, but it's I think somehow space and death are related. We don't tend to look and think about this much bigger world that is clearly evident whenever we get out of the polluted cities. You can see this. We're part of a much bigger thing. And my mother died last New Year's Eve, and so that was both my parents gone. And I think it's almost like this glass floor, the glass floor that can flick to black. I mean, glass that can. You don't tend to look through it as long as your parents are there. Like, they're stopping you from falling into this big black hole. And when they've gone, you have to look at it. And so I think somehow, I've thought about religion and so on during my life, but I'm an atheist now. And I'm not saying that there isn't some spiritual stuff that we don't understand, because that feels intuitively correct. But it's that thing about power and responsibility being somewhere else. You know, I think actually that needs to come back on our shoulders, and in a way it's liberating. I mean, I did these 2-weekend courses once called EST, but they taught me a lot of things. But one of it, and the way I like to picture it, is that when you're in the rough water on the boat, you can be in 2 places. You can be a passenger downstairs, swearing at the bastards that are taking you left, right, and messing up, or you can be the captain and at the helm and hold the helm and steer it. Yeah. At that point, you're responsible. But taking the responsibility gives you the freedom to change course. As long as you're the victim and you're blaming other people, you don't have that freedom.
Yeah.
So I try and remember that.
When you describe this image now, I was thinking of an ocean that is so wild, so it doesn't really matter what you do with the helm.
Right. Okay. Well, there you go.
Which is another interesting side of it. Like,
that's your
what
version.
if you're in a situation where you can actually not, even if you try, you cannot. You're out in the wild. I mean, there's so many interesting things to talk about. I just briefly would like to ask you about. This could be a long conversation though, but I ask you, like, are you most troubled by the distances in space, or is it time that bothers you when it comes to, like...
Yeah, well, I'm interested in this idea that time is an illusion. You know, that because sometimes you have the feeling, I mean, I've definitely felt, you know, I have a little voice that I listen to that will give indications of what I should do and what things are coming. You know, I think I get little flashes of the future, and you know, clearly it's a lot easier and to build a career around predicting the past than it is predicting the future. But nonetheless, you know, I think we do have windows into the future, and I think there are, you know, some good evidence of some psychic capability. I think there was some experiments done when the Americans thought the Russians had developed psychic powers and might be able to kill people at will, you know, just by thinking about it. They thought, shit, if there's something in this, we better learn about it. So they started inviting people with different psychic abilities, and I have a friend who was one of the people running the tests at Stanford Research Institute.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of people that came in, and one, which I actually wrote a song about, was shown a map and said, okay, can you see anything at this point here? And he said, yeah, I can see an underground facility, it's a defense facility, I can see an office and a table and a chair, and there's a book open, and it's got a picture of a Russian rocket. And they did that just to see if someone could read what was happening in one of their defense establishments, and he got it absolutely right. And in the Elders Project, you know, I met President Carter, and he was the only U.S. president who said that he's seen a UFO. So you get to hang out a little bit and ask these silly questions.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what about the UFO? And he said, yeah, well, it was exactly that, an unidentified flying object. I don't think it was any more. I don't know what it was, but I reported it. But I will tell you a story. We lost a plane in Angola, and it had something very sensitive cargo, so probably weapons or something. Anyway, it came down. We had weeks trying to find it, sent in all sorts of people. No one could find it. And a general decided he was going to see a psychic. He said, if I'd been asked, I wouldn't have given permission. But she pinpointed on a map of Angola exactly where the plane was, and we sent people in, and that's where it was. So, I mean, there are these sort of stories and these sort of capacities, but I do think, so there are still some nice mysteries to uncover.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
But yeah, how it all fits, I don't know. I mean, have you had any strange or unusual experiences that fall into that category for yourself, or where you know someone on the telephone before, or someone's going to call before they do, or any of that sort of stuff?
Well, that's interesting because there are a few different perspectives on it, but from a well-being point of view, I was taught that. I mean, one way of naming that is to call it magical thinking, like when you think that things are connected. And from a psychological point of view, it's proven to make you sad. Because and I think it's about when you're in a bad place, you start to think, if I tap the door 3 times before I open it, that is probably gonna keep me safe. And I think, I mean, kids do this a lot, but I think also people in under big strain, you start using these rituals,
Yeah,
to try to keep you safe, which is, I mean, that's the foundation of religion. That, I mean, everything started with, you're in the jungle and you hear a noise and suddenly you're attacked by something. So you start connecting, like, I heard that noise and after that this happened. And so I should probably, and the next time I had made this little mark on a tree, and then I heard the noise and it didn't happen. So that must be, so you start connecting all these things. And apparently, like in a modern life, it's not helping your well-being to use that kind of magical thinking, because you start making up patterns that doesn't really affect the real world. And for me, that has been helpful to, at stressful times, to realize that it doesn't matter the way I put this together, because the world is the world and there are no hidden connections. But
do you find you do that sometimes, though, that you say, if
I
I go left here, everything's going to work out tomorrow? Or
I did that under a very stressful short period, but I was actually helped by that thing, that this is called magical thinking, and it's just going to make you
crazy.
Crazy, or you're not going to feel well about it. And that was really helpful, actually. But now I did it a lot as a kid, and I assume a lot of kids do that.
No, I've done that as an adult, and I think you're right, that it's under times of great stress that you need some support or help that you can't find anywhere else. So that sort of magical thinking, as you call it, comes into play. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and when a close person to you is seriously ill,
Yeah,
you take every chance you have.
yeah, sure.
Well, I better knock on this window, because
Exactly.
if it helps me, then it's worth it. So that's, I think I'm also not a religious person. I grew up in the church, and I'm very fond of the culture, the musical culture in church, and so I have this strange love relationship to parts of the church, which is kind of fascinating for me. So it's not something that is double for me, but it's hard to describe sometimes, that I don't believe in God, but I'm very fascinated by the church and the culture. And there's also something interested about, as a religious person, you actually put things outside yourself. So there's a slight chance, there's a chance that you're a less egoistic person.
Yeah, no,
We know that it's not like that in real life, but you put things somewhere else, and So I have this feeling that there is a value in religion, but myself, I don't believe in what's beyond the physical.
There's an interesting book Alain de Botton wrote called Religion for Atheists.
Yeah.
But I think I'm getting waved at here. I think we're going to be running out of tape very soon.
Yeah.
But it's just been a fascinating conversation. You know, I think you're a very important artist, and I hope we can help get a lot more people exposed to what I think is really wonderful music. So thank you so much, Emil.
Thank you very much. Very nice to talk to you.
Good to talk to you.
Yeah.
Take care. To be continued.